welcome to this explainer. It's pretty wild when you really stop and think about it. Every single weekend, millions of people literally paint their faces, scream at their TVs, and let themselves be emotionally crushed, all because a group of strangers lost a game. And as a society, we just accept this extreme emotional volatility as totally normal. But what about the person sitting right there in the exact same room, watching the exact same game, and feeling absolutely nothing? Well, today we're going to decode the fascinating psychological and biological differences between the diehard sports fanatic and the person who feels pure apathy toward the whole thing. So, here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the great societal divide, move into the biology of the fan, then flip to the wiring of the non-fan. After that, we'll explore internal rewards over external and wrap up with the stakes we choose. All right, section 1, the great societal divide. Let's look at the actual numbers here. Our society is deeply, deeply split on this. Roughly 60% of the population follows sports religiously. They treat their teams like a modern extension of their tribe. But look at that other slice. A massive 40% feels absolute total apathy toward the entire spectacle. Now, people in that 40% bracket, they constantly get mischaracterized. They're called boring or passionless, or people act like they're somehow missing this essential human trait. But as we're about to see, this absolutely isn't a social defect. It's actually just a completely different biological operating system running in the background. Okay, moving to section 2, the biology of the fan. Let's look at what's happening inside the stadium brain. So, what is it that keeps fans so intensely glued to the screen? It boils down to a psychological mechanism called intermittent reinforcement. Because you never know exactly when that incredible goal or that game-winning touchdown is going to happen, that unpredictability hits the brain with these highly compelling, irregular microdoses of dopamine. Actually, fMRI scans show that watching a live game lights up the exact same reward centers in your brain as gambling does. It's literally a slot machine schedule of unpredictable external rewards. And that intense biological rush fuels this really fascinating behavior called BIRGing. That stands for basking in reflected glory. This is how spectators manage to bridge that huge physical gap between sitting in the stands and the athletes sweating on the field. They literally claim the athletes' achievements as their own. It is kind of the ultimate form of external validation, right? You get to absorb all the massive highs of victory without actually taking on any of the physical risk or doing any of the actual work. Just listen to how fans talk. It perfectly illustrates this in action. After a massive victory, what do people say? We won. But the second there's a humiliating defeat, notice how the pronoun automatically flips. Suddenly, it's they lost. This automatic pronoun switch is a brilliant psychological defense mechanism. It lets fans safely protect their own identity, seamlessly attaching to the external success, while instantly distancing themselves the second failure hits. All right, section 3, the wiring of the non-fan. Let's zoom into the minds of that 40%. Now, here's the really crucial point. Indifference to a championship game, it's not a conscious choice. Researchers have actually found that physical variations in dopamine receptor genes can predict this lack of response. For non-fans, their reward centers basically just stay completely dormant during vicarious spectator-driven competition. They literally just do not get that dopamine hit from watching someone else's simulated struggle. It just doesn't compute for them. But because they aren't chasing those unpredictable stadium highs, their empathy allocation, how they spend their emotional energy, shifts dramatically. Studies consistently show that non-fans score super high in openness to experience. They crave internal novelty, so instead of a stadium, they're often seeking their emotional highs through independent creative pursuits, or art, or deep intellectual challenges. They are energized by doing things, not watching things. They want genuine reciprocity, not a one-sided relationship with a corporate sports franchise. And this broad internal focus allows non-fans to develop something called high self-complexity. Instead of dropping an anchor and tying their entire identity to a single sports team, they define themselves through a really wide variety of roles and interests. It's like having a diversified emotional portfolio. Because their self-esteem isn't tied up in external validation or a competition they can't control, their identity is incredibly stable. Their entire sense of self isn't going to collapse just because a group of strangers fumbled a ball on Sunday. So if we put these two operating systems side by side, the contrast is absolutely profound. The fan thrives on the external thrill of the vicarious spectacle. They get their biological reward from unpredictable events happening out there to their chosen tribe. But the non-fan, they are calibrated to find deep flow states through personal mastery. They prefer direct engagement, where their own lived personal effort actually dictates the outcome. It's the stark difference between needing an external, shared spectacle for fulfillment versus finding it quietly, entirely from within. Which brings us nicely to Section 4, internal rewards over external. You see this difference vividly when it comes to personal fitness. A lot of performative sports and fitness culture runs on what we call controlled motivation. That's dragging yourself to the gym driven by guilt or fear, or this heavy external pressure to perform for an audience. But non-fans often just naturally step right into autonomous motivation. For them, movement isn't a battle against their own body. It's a quiet, sustainable dialogue. They exercise because it feels good internally, completely free from that intense pass-or-fail mentality. And this reveals a really powerful truth about the non-fan's mindset. True discipline is quiet. This approach strips away all that toxic perfectionism and the need to constantly wage war against yourself. It proves that the absolute strongest form of discipline operates entirely in the background. It builds real confidence from the inside out, without ever needing a crowd to cheer it on, or a social media following, or the roaring validation of a stadium. For the non-fan, watching strangers compete is always going to feel just a little bit empty because their brain sets a structurally different, and you could argue, much higher standard. Like this quote perfectly captures, "The brain only gives you the reward when you personally cause something. They demand genuine lived effort. For them, mastery is that amazing moment a skill finally clicks because of your own hard work, not a point scored by a guy you've never even met." Finally, Section 5, the stakes we choose. Let's talk about where all this energy goes. For a lot of non-fans, their distance from sports culture goes way deeper than just being bored. It's actually driven by justice sensitivity. It's this quiet, unshakable realization of the really jarring math of our culture. It is the inability to unsee a nurse working a grueling shift without a break, or a teacher shaping the lives of 30 kids, all while a stadium spectacle generates millions of dollars for a backup player in a single week. Once they see that massive gap between what society pays for and what it actually needs, they literally just can't unsee it. Now, we have to be completely honest here and look at the flip side. Sometimes these really noble traits, like justice sensitivity or a craving for depth and personal mastery, they can easily become a convenient shield. It's totally possible for a non-fan to use their love of depth as a sophisticated excuse to just avoid risking any real emotional investment. Protecting yourself from the volatility of being a fan is one thing, but if it morphs into retreating from shared community altogether or avoiding putting anything on the line in your life, well, then that distance is just a habit of avoidance, right? Not a healthy trait. But ultimately, if you are that person who sits totally calm in a room full of screaming fans, remember this. Stepping away from that tribal stadium is not an act of apathy. You aren't missing some essential human experience. When it's grounded in healthy personal mastery, it's a deliberate, psychologically sound choice. You're just taking all of that emotional energy and quietly redirecting it toward the immediate, tangible world around you. You are choosing your own stakes. Which brings us to our final thought to wrap up this explainer. Whether you are out there painting your face on Sundays to scream with your tribe, or you're spending your weekends in the quiet, independent pursuit of personal mastery, you have to ask yourself, are you fully invested in something with real stakes? Are you putting something on the line in your own life where your own efforts dictate the outcome? That actually matters. Thank you so much for exploring this whole psychological puzzle with me today. Keep examining the why behind what we care about, and I'll see you in the next explainer.